Okay, we're live now. Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Thursday, February 22nd, and this is the Senate Government Operations Committee. And we are looking at our very big bill on government response to flooding, which includes a lot of things, or to natural disasters. And the section that we are specifically getting some testimony on right now, I need to find that extension, but it is basically the contents of S-235, which is the bill about death benefits for public works employees. And let me see if I can, here we go. Starts on page, it starts at the very, very bottom of page 44. Top of page 45, section 21. And Ashlyn, we just wanted to hear from I think your office manages this fund and then would pay out the benefits if they were paid out. And then there's been some recent updates, I believe, to this benefit. So I just wanted to hear, I think, the status, how things work, if you see any problems with this, any suggested changes, etc. If we, if we're to keep this in the bill.
Sure. So I don't think I've seen the most recent version of 310. So I'm working off of S-235. My page numbers might be a little bit different.
That's fine. I think it's exact language just plopped in the bill at this point with no changes yet.
Okay.
I think that will work just fine.
Great. So you're correct, Madam Chair. And for the record, my name is Ashlyn Doyan. I'm the Director of Policy in the State Treasurer's Office. The Treasurer's Office does oversee the administration of the Emergency Personnel Survivors Benefit Fund, as well as the review board that accompanies that fund. The board is typically only constituted when there's an application for payment. There's not been an application for payment since 2016, which we actually feel is a very good thing. It doesn't mean that the fund is underutilized. It just means that we've not had a death. So that's positive. Currently, there's about $176,000 in the fund. You'll see in the monetary benefit section that the S-235 language currently says that the monetary benefit is $50,000. In the BAA, in both the House and Senate passed version, and I don't believe that there will be any changes in conference committee, but we have increased that amount to $80,000 for the benefit payout. It was our understanding that there had never been an inflationary adjustment to that amount, and we thought that it was time to make that change. We did not seek any additional appropriation for the fund, and we have not for several years. I don't see any problems with our office being able to administer the fund and the review board with the changes. I just have a couple of comments. It's the responsibility of the review board to both sort of verify the eligibility of the application when a payment needs to be made, and also to approve or deny the payment. In order to make the job of the review board very simple, I might recommend clarifying exactly what public works employee means or public works personnel means. I see in the language that there are some examples of circumstances where a death would happen that would be eligible. But one of the things that I remember from the emergency flood response in July is that so many employees were doing so many different jobs in order to take care of the response. So someone who maybe their job responsibility didn't entail putting out signs for high water was maybe doing that in that case. So I don't know, I'm agnostic as to what the committee decides, but some precision there would be helpful for the review board in making their determinations. The other thing I would say is that although we hope to never have to make a payment out of this fund because we hope that we never have a death in a catastrophic situation, one thing that you may want to consider is whether or not adding additional eligibility for the applications dilutes the potential benefit that is available for those who the fund was originally intended. The legislature could always make appropriations to the fund to account for any payments that are necessary to make. But right now, with the $80,000 increase, you only have about enough money in the fund to make payments in the event of 2 deaths. So if we were to experience a significant influx in the number of benefits payments made out, we would probably have to come back to the legislature for an appropriation. Otherwise not be able to offer the benefit. So that's one thing to consider. I don't know, I mean, in speaking with the treasurer earlier today, I think he quoted that there are about 300 professional firefighters in the state and about 3,000 sort of like emergency EMS and volunteer firefighters around the state. I don't know what the population is in terms of public works personnel that we have. So I can't say, you know, how much more frequently we would expect to have to make a benefits payout, but just one thing to consider.
Right, absolutely. Well, and I think that in the event that the incredibly unfortunate and tragic event that we do need more money in the fund, I think there is an expectation of coming into the legislature that the legislature would say yes under those circumstances. I mean, we can't find a future legislature, but also I can't imagine that they would say no. But you're right, there's no guarantees of that, and currently the fund is what it is. We do have in the room the drafting attorney Damian Leonard, who drafted the S-235, and he had already flagged that we need a better definition of public works employees. So I think that our personnel, so I think he and other attorneys are sort of working on clarifying that, and just saying it on the record. I welcome Damian, if you have to reach out to Ashlyn on the definition, feel free to do that. So you have, if the treasurer's office has any suggestions for it as well.
Sure, thank you.
Senator Clarkson, did you have a question?
Yeah, and I apologize for being late, you know, meeting the meeting and no time to get lunch, so I apologize. Question I have is, how much is in the fund at the moment?
Approximately $176,000 and some change.
So not very much, and it's established, hopefully it's somewhere where it's growing.
Yes, and the fund is allowed to retain its own interest from year.
And I just want to say the obvious, which I think we've already discussed, which is some emergency personnel already are covered for death benefits, workers' comp, and other things with firefighters. So some emergency personnel are covered for some of this penalty.
What do you mean, in this fund or in other places? Yes, I think some people have benefits in other places. And
right, I mean,
hold on just a second. I see Damian in the back, so I want to actually, do you want to come up to the table?
Yeah, sure.
Join us.
So just for the record, Damian Leonard, Office of Legislative Counsel. So under workers' compensation, which covers all employees in the state, there is a death benefit if you pass away from a work-related injury. There may also be benefits through the pension system for some workers. But I would actually defer to the treasurer's office on knowledge about that, but I believe that there are some death benefits in the pension systems. So, and that's been the case for the emergency personnel as well, who have been part of this. So this is over and above those benefits. If you decide to move forward with this would be over and above anything that exists already.
Okay, and so Ashlyn, does the pension system have death benefits already for some workers?
So for workers that are in Group C, law enforcement officers, there is a more generous death benefit in terms of their retirement. Also, as a state employee outside of the pension system, but we have the option to buy into very low cost group life insurance. And I think that we are eligible to receive either 2 or 3 times our annual salary with a very low cost monthly premium. One thing I will note is that there's a bill on the House that I believe that Representative Higley is the sponsor, and that bill seeks to add law enforcement officers to this fund. We discussed this in House Gov Ops when they were working on our BAA language request, and at the time we had said that we would prefer to not expand eligibility that far, especially knowing that frequently law enforcement officers have special life insurance or death benefits through their employer that volunteers may not have.
Mhm.
So, but really our what was behind our comments in House Gov Ops earlier this year was not debating the merits of whether or not someone deserves this death benefit, but more thinking about the scope of people that this fund is intended to protect and the amount of money currently in the fund.
Right. And do the people who, the firefighters and EMS who currently qualify for this benefit, are they all firefighters and EMS, both volunteer and professional?
Yes.
Okay. That was definitely something I wanted to clarify. So there are people who are full-time employees who are part of the pension system who would also qualify for this death benefit in if they were to be killed in the line of duty.
Yes.
Okay. Senator White.
You asked the exact question.
Oh.
So one piece that I think I'm still trying to understand, that I think is important for folks to know is under the line of duty section on page 46, and I think this is exactly the same. It was in Senator Watson's bill, but maybe I'm wrong. It's when you are responding to a hazardous situation.
Right.
So the way the fund is now, is it required that you be in a hazardous situation and that's how the untimely death
You look-
occurs?
If you look just a few lines above that, there it describes the line of duty for emergency personnel, which is responding to a call for a fire or emergency or a training drill or similar service in another town.
Okay.
It does, and then
Then that's where you add the new.
the public works personnel is the hazardous situation and after language. So
Okay.
yeah, they're broken out a little bit. Part of the reason for emergency personnel having answering or returning to a call is because often some of the hazards they face are on the way to the emergency because they're racing to get there. And people run red lights and don't see the emergency vehicle coming, et cetera. So that's one of the reasons why the language is different.
Thank you. That's right.
Yeah, thank you, Damien. There's also the 72-hour provision. So I sort of read that to mean that if there was sort of a hypothetical where there's an emergency responder and there's a lot of physical exertion involved in the response, and then several days later, for example, someone has a cardiac event, that is considered in the line of duty.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's based on the workers' comp law, which also covers that for law enforcement and firefighters when they have some sort of cardiac event that occurs within a couple of days after the emergency.
Okay.
And that happens.
Senator Watson, did you have a question?
I do, I think, not sure with this new draft where it is, but we are defining it under emergency personnel.
Page 45 and 46 of the draft has the definitions, so.
Yep, so that's the existing statutory definition of emergency personnel. Under number 4. So just above line.
On page 46.
I actually don't have your draft. in
It's
front of me,
page
so.
45 at the bottom, emergency personnel
120.
meetings.
Oh, you're looking at two different,
I guess I'm thinking about the place where we are defining public works and then
Oh, that's a
water
different section.
folks as emergency.
Oh, that's earlier in the bill.
Yes, it's kind of, and so this is just as a drafting question, really, like, do we need to, cause here it calls out, you know, the death benefits for emergency personnel. Maybe it's a different chapter, so it doesn't have to be the same. I'm just worried about blessing, using the same.
Yes, and I
Great.
think that Tim and Damien, we're gonna get together
Okay.
and make sure that those two sections of the bill
Okay, good.
have the
They
same
have.
definitions, and I don't, they just haven't had a chance,
Okay.
because it just got put in the bill.
Okay.
So that will be in the next draft, and hopefully
Yes,
you can work with Ashlyn or whoever else, and Aaron Forand, BEM might have some input on that, or ideas on that too.
okay,
Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, no,
Like
you're
that,
right.
like, oh,
They need to
these
be aligned.
are.
Yeah. Senator Pehoski.
Yeah, for the 72-hour language, is it specific to cardiac events?
no, so if,
No.
it applies to, it means any disease that directly arises out of, and in the course of service, that's literally the workers' comp language, including a heart injury or disease symptomatic within 72 hours from the date of last service. Occupation-related illnesses can include, exposure to chemicals or other things that, so there's, it can include exposure to chemicals that have lingering effects and that sort of thing. It could include things like the effects of smoke inhalation, exposure to if you're doing a hazardous response or a hazardous materials response, exposure to a hazardous material that then has a lingering effect on your body would fall under occupation related illness. In workers' comp, we've defined it more broadly to include things like cancer for firefighters. That is not clearly included here. So those are, I mean, that raises a whole host of other issues, but if you look at the workers' comp language in Title 21, the occupation related illness language is broader, but this takes the basic piece of it, which is that a disease that arises directly out of the actual work event there. So the things that we're most likely looking at for the emergency personnel are things like various cardiac injuries, chemical related injuries, and then possibly trauma related illnesses that might go on. So beyond the initial injury, if there's a lingering illness in the body that carries on out of that may be covered. A lot of this is going to come down to a determination by the board of whether the illness that caused the death directly arose out of the work, or if it was simply something where the individual was weakened and then became susceptible to another illness that eventually killed them, and maybe it's indirectly related, but not directly related.
Yeah,
So,
the things that came up for me were like the instances of dry drowning where someone is sent home, they think they're better, and then their lungs end up filling with water or inflammation. So like that came up for me as we were talking about flooding as well as radiation.
yep,
and it
radiation.
sounds like,
The tricky thing with all of these is showing the direct connection. So
Right.
there has to be a direct connection. So if, for example, Vermont Yankee were still functioning and there was a radioactive response there, we know that the exposure to radiation at the levels of like a reactor meltdown can cause an illness that takes weeks to months to
yeah,
come to term, but then ultimately results in death. That could be a directly related. So the arising out of and in the course of, or they're rising within 72 hours. Allows them to capture things where it's like what you were talking about, where they think they're okay. And they go home and they have, the symptoms show up 72 hours later, even though the direct cause was during the emergency response.
That's
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's helpful. And we do want to keep it focused on responding to an all hazards event or, a hazardous to be focused on the intent of our bill, which is
Disaster.
natural disaster response. But okay, Ashlyn, thank you for your patience. We had a surprise bonus guest in the room when Damien walked in, so do you have any other concerns or suggestions for the language at this point?
One suggestion for the language that you might want to consider is including in the monetary benefit section the words up to right before the amount. So after the BAA changes are effectuated, it would be up to $80,000. And I think that the benefit of doing that, and just so you know, historically, the board has always approved the maximum benefit. But in the event, for example, that you had multiple deaths as a result of one incident, and it was outside of the legislative session, payments could be made immediately to those individuals for, for example, there's $176,000 in the fund. If you had 3 deaths, you could divide that sum by 3 instead of if you were constricted to sending out $80,000, you could pay for 2 deaths, but then there would only be $16,000 for the remaining person. What that would do is allow the board to act immediately to pay out a benefit without necessarily waiting for a subsequent legislative appropriation that may or may not come, because as you said, we can't bind a future legislature. So that's the benefit of that. The sort of con or argument against doing that is you could potentially sort of dilute the overall benefit amount. I don't think that any of the members of the board would seek to do that. But one sort of suggestion for the committee to think about.
We could also put language in something like that if there's insufficient funds in the fund, they could go to the emergency board or something like that to get more funds. So maybe we could consider that so that that situation doesn't happen. We could include the up to language and another valve for them to go to for funding if the legislature's not in session, so that there aren't those concerns.
Absolutely. I think that's a great idea.
Okay. Quick question. Go ahead, Senator Clarkson.
Thank you. Is Damien often we are payers of last resort? I'm not last resort, last after everybody else is paid out. So if there's a firefighter, let's say, or somebody here is eligible for another the death or death benefit or other benefits, could we make the state the payer of last? I don't know what we call that.
I hear what you're saying, yeah.
So the payer of last resort, so like basically.
They have to explore and go through all the other benefits that they're eligible for before they come to the state.
So the thing to remember with this is not, if you don't have workers' comp insurance, you're eligible for this benefit. This is simply if you die in the line of duty, you're eligible for this benefit. So we would be changing the benefit significantly. The whole benefit is structured as in recognition of your service, in addition to workers' comp, life insurance, and anything else you may get. So for example, police, fire, and emergency medical personnel are also entitled to a much more substantial federal benefit for death in the line of duty. So the benefit is really set up to recognize the hazardous service, not as a backstop if there's nothing there. So I think adding that would be separate.
Nope, that's I mean, fine.
Or not separate, but change the law.
No, and I don't want to change the intent, the intents of
Okay, are there any other questions? Awesome, we're gonna move on. I know that Damien is gonna be working on the language with Tim on the definitions of personnel, so that will help. We'll see that in our next draft. Thank you so much, Ashlyn, and if you have other further suggestions, you can certainly reach out to me and Olivia and Damien on the language. So thank you very much for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Enjoy. Bye.
Okay, so we're committee, thank you very much, Damien.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for popping in.
Yeah. Happy to.
We are going to, take a break from S310. We're gonna have a full walkthrough later, with him, but right now, we're gonna talk about some charters. So we have,
A big shift.
Rep Karen Dolan, you wanna come on up to the table? And we're in the land of Essex, both
Is that an amusement park?
city and
Lots of fun.
city and town. So we're gonna look at these two charters today, and if you wanna give us a little overview, I assume you're the reporter from the house, so.
I don't really be the reporter, I'm
You're
introduce it, yeah.
You're okay.
Sponsor of it,
The
so
sponsor from the house.
Karen Dolan, representative from Essex Junction, and I really am gonna be brief. We have our city manager here online who's going to speak to some more of the details. But this is kind of how we did it when we were in house co-ops. It seemed to work well, just basically sharing that in many ways, this is a kind of housekeeping charter change request, because we created our brand new city charter, I think it was what, 2 years ago, right? And so this was, and looking at it, what are some tweaks and adjustments that are needed, and there was overwhelming support from the community, which I think Regina will share in the vote, so really hoping that you have support in moving it through, and again, like I said, I'm gonna be brief, but I'll stick around while others speak on this, in case there's any questions or any follow-up.
Okay, so you weren't, if you were not the reporter, do you know what the vote in committee was, in the GovOps committee?
My understanding is unanimous. I don't have any,
And on the floor as well, there was not any votes?
I don't remember, I feel like I would remember if there was,
Okay.
but.
We usually just ask this for
Yes,
everybody,
yes.
just to see how it went over there. Okay. Any questions for Rep Dolan? Okay, awesome, thank you.
So we'll find out what the vote was.
For the town.
For the town, from the town.
Oh, from the city, yes, so
From
Regina will be able to,
Yeah.
I'm sure,
So-
I have it, but I also don't wanna steal her report, she has a nice one pager that she's drafted.
So we have Regina, oh, no, Tucker Anderson is gonna go next, so if you wanna come on up, Tucker, sorry about that. And walk us through the draft.
All right, for the record, good afternoon, Tucker Anderson, Legislative Council.
Hi.
Hi, H 516, amendments to the charter of the city of Essex Junction. Should be fairly straightforward.
Okay.
3 changes to the city's charter. So we're working through section 2, which contains those amendments to 24 VSA chapter 4. In section 206, this removes language related to incompatible offices. It's a very specific incompatible office restriction within the city, and replaces it instead with a reference to general law. So this would allow council members to hold other office if it's allowed by state statute. And you'll get some information later, I'm sure, but there was a specific issue that led to this charter amendment.
Correct. Oh, you have a question, sorry.
Yeah, so this charter change is taking out the specific piece that they had and just aligning with state law, do they need to do that? Like, I understand they need to take out the specific piece, but then they also need to state that they're just gonna follow the state law?
They don't have to, except they are choosing to express this as at first a prohibition against council members holding other office or employed positions within the city, unless there's something out there in general law that would allow them to. So it's not necessary,
Okay,
but the way they are framing it perhaps expresses some intent for the council members. And again, there's a specific
okay, I'll wait.
issue that led to this, which is state law occasionally does require a position to default to the select board in the absence of a specific state or local officer. In this case, it was the health officer in the city, and their charter prevented that from happening.
All right.
Okay. The second is updates to the moderator provision. So the first is that it's changing from an elected to an appointed position, and they're clarifying that this is for purposes of the informational meeting. Moderators, of course, oversee floor vote issues within a municipality. So for Australian ballot, the moderator is really just there for informational hearings.
And they have an Australian ballot and Essex City.
Yes.
Okay.
Are there other towns that have appointed moderators as opposed to elected moderators?
This is the first I have seen.
It's a good question. I will take a look at both Title 17. There are Title 17 provisions in general law that allow change to the term of your position at the local level. And I will also take a look through the charters and let you know how common it is.
Awesome, thanks.
Greg?
And finally, in section 401, this is authority for the city council to set the next annual meeting date on or before January 1st. So questions came up about the timing here. This just requires that by the end of January 1st, the annual meeting date, the next annual meeting date will be set for the city.
For the following year. So are we thinking out more than a year in advance?
Yeah.
Okay, we're thinking a few months in advance.
Correct.
Thank you.
And for reference, I think last year's annual meeting was in April, and the very first annual meeting was actually shortly after the city came into existence. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was in July.
Oh.
So maybe that'll be a consistent date.
But they don't have to.
They don't need it,
It can change every year.
as long as it happens by January 1st.
And on their annual meeting, is that when they elect their city councilors? Okay, so they're not elected on town meeting day?
They are elected at the annual meeting date, which is their town meeting day.
Which is
Okay,
Australia.
it's their city meeting day.
Correct.
Okay,
We can call it annual meeting, but yes.
okay, cool. Maybe you can just stick right there.
Sure.
Okay. And now we're gonna hear from Regina Mahoney, the city manager of Essex Junction. Hi, Regina. Thanks
Hi.
for being with us today. We're gonna introduce ourselves for you and other in the room, just because you've not been in our committee before. So I'm Senator Ruth Hardy and I represent the Addison district.
I'm Olivia Parker, Committee Assistant.
Senator Tanya Vygotsky, I represent Chittenden Central, of which the city of Essex Junction is a part.
Woohoo! I'm Senator Rebecca White and I'm from the Windsor County District.
Senator Bob Norris, Franklin County, in the town of Elwood in Grand Isle County.
Senator Ann Watson from the Washington District.
Allison Parks, the Windsor County District.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. And thanks for letting me in a little early, Olivia. It was so interesting to understand the breadth of issues you folks are dealing with. So thanks for all of that. Tucker, thank you for going through all that. So yeah, essentially that first change is really came to light when we did not have a health officer filling that position, and that by state law lands on the chair of the city council. And so we just wanted to make sure to get that corrected so we could actually, hopefully, we won't be in that position again, but if we find ourselves in that position, we'll be able to fulfill that state law. You folks have my 2-pager, but essentially that first section of the change passed by 86% of the voters, and the second sentence in that section passed by 76% of the voters. Then the second change is the moderator change, this just made sense for the reasons that Tucker explained, that we don't actually have a floor vote anymore. We go by Australian ballot. So that would allow the city council to appoint the moderator for that. That passed by 78% of the voters. And then the third change is the change to how we will define when our annual meeting happens. So traditionally in the village of Essex Junction, and we still go by this date now, we have voted in April. My understanding of the history of that is so that the village residents could attend the town meeting on the town side and then also have their own village meeting off of that cycle. Currently, the Essex Westford School District also votes at that April time period. If they ever change to the traditional town meeting date, allowing us this flexibility in the time frame of setting our annual meeting would allow us to shift, and so we would not be asking folks to come out at a different date than what the school may shift to. So that's the idea there, and that passed by 86% of the voters.
Each section had a separate.
Cool. And just so you know, Regina's testimony is on our website and it has the percentages of the vote and stuff like that in it. Knowing that you're probably gonna be reporting this, I wanna make sure you get your questions answered if you have any, so.
Yes. Do you know what percentage of your registered voters came out to vote?
And what was that number?
Yes, so you'll see there that we have 7,769 voters on our checklist. Out of, we had 1,991 voted ballots.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and this is in her written testimony, so yes.
Was
Yeah.
listening, not looking at it.
Yeah, no, I'm just checking to make sure so that you have a reference for it. And the moderator, could you, what was was there a specific incident or situation behind wanting to appoint the moderator, or
Yeah,
what was up with that?
because that's a first, I think, for a while.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't unfortunately have the history. I know that I assume, and I don't know this for sure, but I assume the village charter had that same language that the moderator was voted on, and so the city charter then had that same language. It just because the moderator doesn't necessarily have the same role, it seemed to make sense to sort of move that to and more of an appointment by the city council, then put it forward to the voters.
And the moderator is just overseeing the informational meeting. It's not when people are voting anyway.
That's correct.
Okay, that makes more sense if it's just informational. Yeah, okay, are there any other questions for Ms. Mahoney? Senator Clarkson?
How long have you been the city manager?
I have been here for a year and a half. So I'm not quite this, the city is a little bit older than my tenure here.
It's a tiny bit. But so you're its first full city manager, yes?
Yes.
Great. Congratulations.
Are there any other questions? All right, and Tucker, if you're able to get that info, for Senator Bukowski in particular, that would be helpful, but everybody. We might vote this out tomorrow if we can at the beginning of our meeting, but we can also hold it till Tuesday if we are waiting for information, so don't feel rushed if it's hard.
I can relay some information now that might be enough for
Awesome.
you to
Go for it.
make some decisions. So first, did look through Title 17. The provisions related to the appointment of moderators was actually a proposal in S-181 that did not make it all the way through. So under general law, the moderator is elected for purposes of annual meetings. There are municipalities that in their charter have appointed moderators, and the most recent example is the town of Milton.
Okay, what,
That we
that's
just-
181 is,
Yes, I can't remember the act number that came out of that, but it was the omnibus, off-the-shelf emergency provisions from Senate Government Operations and the updates to municipal law. So it was kind of an omnibus bill of municipal authority and
20 or 20.
responses to lessons learned from COVID.
got it,
Oh, lessons learned, so maybe it's 22.
yeah. Okay,
Yes.
Yeah.
excellent. Any other questions on this one for Tucker? Does anybody want to hear from anyone else on this or have other outstanding questions?
I
Senator
just want to
Carson?
clarify, the vote, I assume, was a voice vote on the House floor.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Regina, for coming to be with us today and for your service to the city of Essex Junction. It's a tough job to work at the local level, especially with everything going on. So, we really appreciate your dedication to the city. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, our pleasure.
I'd love to have those.
Excellent.
Women city manager.
Okay, so we're gonna, thanks, Karen. We probably will vote on this tomorrow, if you're otherwise from people that you don't want to, or if we hear from, we get a like deluge of people wanting to testify on something. So Parker, why don't you just stay here and we'll start with you on S 518. Do you have the? Yeah. This one's longer.
It's a town, it's a bit bigger, right? You're bigger population.
we had to
Rewrite
the charter for
the town, since we were no longer our big happy family.
If you're ready, page 518 contains the amendments to the charter of the town of Essex. It is a bit longer, but shouldn't be too much more complicated to discuss. So we will start again in section 2 of the charter, which amends 24 FBSA chapter 117, the town of Essex charter. The first instance of amendment is the addition of a new section 107 governing the adoption of license fees at the town level. So this would allow, in addition to any general law authority, the town to adopt and enforce ordinances for the purposes of regulating, licensing, and fixing reasonable and necessary fees for. And I'll move through the enumerated list without reading every single detail. If you have any questions, please stop me. Places of public resort and accommodation, places dispensing food and drink to the public, theaters, displays of fireworks, public dances, itinerant vendors, the exclusive occupancy of public streets or rights of way, the keeping of dogs or other pets, and any other activity that the town has the power to regulate or license by virtue of general law or this charter. This is an exhaustive list of the authority within the charter, so really what we're looking at under that subdivision 9 is any general law authority for towns, with primarily the under 24 BSA section 2291. Something that I've noted for all of the committees that have taken a look at this section is that although the charter here does confer fee-making authority to the town for anything that they have the authority to license or regulate in this list or in general law, it will be harmonized with more specific provisions in general law. So the example that I have been given to the committee is just to kind of wrap our heads around is dog licenses. The Title 20 provisions governing the keeping of dogs and wolf hybrids are very specific. Specific as to the licenses issued, when they must be due, who collects them, and what the fees are. And there is even a specific subdivision that governs the discretionary amount that a municipality may collect above what the state has set as a fee. So because that statute is so granular and specific, and the authority being conferred here, even though special for the town, is somewhat general, they would be read to be harmonized.
Yeah.
General law is going to fill in because it is more specific. And it is likely that a reviewing court would say that the town does not have authority to exceed those very specific fees and procedures set by general law. And there is a Supreme Court case on this very issue, which is the downtown district tax challengers versus the city of Rutland.
And it said that the city of Rutland has to have a dog license fee that's the same as what the state is?
It was not that specific, but it gave everyone a lot of guidance on how to interpret charter-specific taxing authority, here fee authority, versus what is set in general law.
Got it.
And the
Okay.
specific
It wasn't
issue,
specifically about dog license.
no,
Okay.
the issue in that case was around city council authority to redraw the boundaries of a special taxing district.
Okay, got it.
And the court reviewed that and said it must be harmonized with the general law governing the establishment of taxing district boundaries, essentially with special assessments.
Oh, yes. Senator White, do you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that information. You're right up to date on local law. So in this harmonization, in our town, we have a dog wolf hybrid review, essentially. And I don't know if that is something that you would be, I don't know if that's state law or if that's just our charter is very specific about if there is a scenario where someone is harmed by a dog wolf hybrid, the determination of a collection of folks to decide what the status of that dog or wolf is it within our charter. Is that state or is that, when would they have to have that?
I would have to take a look.
Oh,
Yeah. It honestly.
It's just a random thing that we were trying to get rid of,
it-
essentially.
At first, when you said dog or wolf hybrid review, I thought maybe it was a magazine that rated the wolf hybrids. But, yes,
It's
I.
a local
but-
fundraising initiative by the town of Hartford.
It is-
Give them hybrid vehicles.
I will take.
And they come with a dog or a wolf.
Listen over.
Sounds nasty.
I don't-
It's not like the fence purveyor thing, like we have fence purveyors in our charter.
Fence viewers.
Thank you, fence viewers in our charter.
It's a critical role of municipal government
It
to make
is.
sure that the fences are appropriately erected, so you do not have animals running at large.
Correct, which is why
And
we,
actually how we used to tax things is one interesting angle to this, which is.
that's just why we have a
Anyway,
bill.
yeah. Sorry.
This is why we're always behind in this room.
I
All right, next
charter
section,
very
10.
specific.
Leonora is enjoying herself.
We still have waiters of coal.
Section 210 is added, a new section 210 is added, if you're with me on page 2, relating to recall procedures for select board members.
Ho ho.
The first step requires that a petition signed by 15% of the registered voters be submitted for the recall of a particular select board member. The calculation of what that 15% requirement is based upon the total number of registered voters at the last preceding municipal election. So it must be 15% of that number based on
The total registered voters, not the total people who voted.
Yes,
All right,
so it's who voted essentially. A small picture for select board members at the most recent meeting.
Like, who put us on it?
Who could have voted, correct? All right,
Yes. It's a regret recall. We regret being voted for this.
subsection B. Within 60 days of receiving the petition, the select board must call a special meeting. Or if the annual meeting is within 60 days, hold the vote on the annual meeting date. The vote is required to be held by Australian ballot. In subsection C, the select board member is removed if at least as many registered voters of the town vote as voted in the election wherein the officer was elected. So there's a threshold requirement, or at least 1/3 of the registered voters of the town vote, whichever is greater. So at minimum, this is always going to require a 1/3 voter turnout.
Wow.
And if the number of people who voted at the election where the select board member was elected is greater than 1/3, it's going to be that higher number.
go ahead.
Majority vote required for removal. End of this subsection requires immediate removal of the select board member, and the select board then names a successor. In subsection D, there's a limit. Recall petitions shall not be brought against an individual more than once within 12 months.
So smart.
One bite at the apple per year.
Um,
Yikes.
so the select board names the successor if the person is voted out of office. So can a select board member? Well, I guess it's a petition, so
It's a
that,
petition.
yeah, so I guess it is a bunch of people asking for a recall, not just one person, so, okay, I answered my own question. Senator Bielanski.
And it is a simple majority.
Yes. Of that 1/3 or greater,
But it's not a 2/3, it's simple majority.
yes.
Okay. Any other questions on this section? Next section.
You can actually move through a whole bunch of these by just noting that Essex is comprehensively reorganizing their charter. That required a lot of technical corrections to the names of the subchapters. You'll notice section 701, there was some cleanup of language related to the city and town school districts. In section 3 of the bill on page 4, you'll notice the exhaustive list of redesignations where sections are moving around, but the text within those sections is not changing.
I did have a question about 701, and it's not a question about the change, but I recall we have talked in the past about the little gap that occurs between fiscal years if they're not written correctly. And it has a name, I don't remember what the name is, but does that exist here?
The Zepto section.
Yeah!
You just wanted him to say that.
So, you are correct that the town charter here does have the Zepto second crisis, which is that the fiscal year starts on July 1st and ends on the last day of June. So you have an infinitesimally small amount of time where there is no fiscal year.
All your
Technically,
business.
this should be written that fiscal year starts on July 1st.
Hopefully.
And that immediately implies that at midnight, you start the new fiscal year. You don't have to specify when it ends.
I do wonder if, while it's in front of us, we should correct
You
that.
need to use Zeptos.
I will use it, but I do think we should correct it,
Okay.
as long as people don't have a problem with us eliminating their Zepto second. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll use it.
Zepto second.
Elimination.
Elimination amendment. That's like the amendment that I did the other day on the floor, literally ledge council titled the grammar amendment.
So it's called Zepto what?
Zepto second. And you can credit House Government Operations for pointing out, I was just saying, there's an infinitesimally small amount of time that is left out of this, and I can't remember which representative it was, Representative Chase.
I knew it. I was like, it's gonna be Seth
Sometimes
Chase,
it's
isn't
a-
it? Yeah.
It's a Zepto second.
Yeah.
That's the smallest amount of
That's
time.
such
One Zepto second.
So it would be hard, quite honestly, to accomplish anything in a Zepto second. So why are we worried about it?
Because you could direct the AI to do something in a Zepto second.
Oh.
There you go, I just injected some
Oh,
computer-based fear into this.
Siri,
All
do
right.
this.
The
Okay.
sections 5 through 7, I will discuss broadly as a transition from a zoning board of adjustment in the town to a development review board.
Mm.
Section 5 allows the select board to appoint the development review board. Section 6 provides for the transition between a zoning board of adjustment and a development review board on or before January 1st of 2025. And section 7 repeals the subdivision that currently allows the select board to appoint the zoning board of adjustment because it will no longer exist as of January 1st.
Okay, so it's going from one kind of appointed board to another kind of an
Correct.
appointed board. And are there duties to the development review board, or are those in general law?
Those established by general law.
Okay, so what's the word that you just, it's still in general law, it is,
Harmonized.
harmonized, that's the word,
Yes.
harmonized.
Yeah, and I can scan through the reorganized sections of the town of Essex charter to see if there's some duties that will transfer, but it does not appear that there are.
Okay. Okay,
Gosh,
that's
all.
That's all. Effective date on passage. That is on the committee. Why did he not suggest that they fix the Zepto second issue over there?
it was a momentary lapse, perhaps.
It was a Zepto
Just a
lapse.
Zepto second.
Is that just?
What's the Zepto laugh?
Okay, thank you, Tucker. Any other questions for Tucker? Okay, Representative Dodge, you wanna come on?
Sure.
You were the sponsor, we got the sponsors instead of the reporters in here, so.
one of, yeah.
No, it's not your fault.
Yeah, so we can pretend a few seconds ago that yeah, so I am the representative, so for the record, Leonora Dodge from Essex Town, and I represent Essex alongside my district mate Ray Garofano, as well as Representative Alyssa Black. We co-sponsored H518, which was a bill to amend the charter. And so I'm not sure whether you need to hear, I mean, the history of the bill generally was that when the town and the city separated, we needed to reorganize our charter. We took that as an opportunity to really direct a team of volunteers and some experts to truly like reorganize and put new questions to the community. And out of that, the committee met weekly for a couple of months at least, really devoted group of people, and ended up giving 5 recommendations to the select board, or a few recommendations to the select board, out of which 5 were put up for vote as separate amendments at town meeting day in March of 23. All 5 amendments got large majority support. House GovOps on January 10th passed the looked at, after discussing the amendments, passed the bill at 1101. January 11th it went through Ways and Means, and on January 24th it had 3rd reading and passed fully by voice vote on the House floor. And so we would really appreciate you guys getting us our, permission to actually function and have a working charter for the town.
Excellent, thank you. Senator, do you have some questions?
I do have a question. So what passed out House Government Operations is not exactly the same as what you've introduced. My understanding from a significant amount of constituent outreach is that there was at least one provision removed. What was that provision, and do you remember what the vote was on that provision by the town?
Yes, so you're referring to there was the committee heard from committee members and advocates who wanted to help us, who wanted us to consider the just cause eviction, an amendment in our charter to add a clause, an article that would be just cause eviction. Capital reserve.
Is that the only thing that I'm just trying to get straight in my head?
It just cause, yes. So shall the town of Essex amend its charter to give the select board, this is what was put to voters. Shall the town of Essex amend its charter to give the select board the power to enact an ordinance to protect residential tenants from eviction without just cause? And it was this very blanket, do we have permission to do something?
Right.
So yes, won by 570. We had 570 voters say yes. We had 383 voters say no, and we had 12 blanks.
So the town voted on this and voted yes.
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 And our Senate Government Operations in House.
House, yeah,
Pull.
chose to pull that out. The logic behind it and the discussion that I attended, what was expressed was that it's a more controversial element of the charter. And as it was voted separately, they didn't want to hold up the whole charter on an issue that it snowballed in would would tank our charter. And I think that, you know, you'd have to ask them some more, I guess, about the path forward, if this is something that the town wanted.
So can you just clarify the vote? When you say it was voted separately, were each section of this charter change voted separately, or was it just voted together?
They were one big ballot, but it had 5 different articles that, to vote on. And
So this was one article included in those.
Yeah, so, you know, like the fiscal year 1 was 657 yes and no 303, and capital reserve fund, you know, so we
I'm
had.
sure those 303 is because of the SEPTA second issue.
Yeah, they were really
Well,
well versed
well,
at
yeah.
that. Cause it's kind of like, when do you know whether you're an ethics city of Essex Junction versus the town, there's that zeptometer, you know?
Zeptometer.
That leads us to the question of how many people voted, how many are on your checklist?
Yeah, so I may defer to our to Tracy Delphia for that exact percentage, because I do have a breakdown, which I think was submitted in testimony, in written testimony to House GovOps, and I'm not sure whether you guys have access to that. This is different air than, you know.
We don't have, oh wait, we have written testimony from Tracy Delcia on our website, so.
Or she is.
It might be,
Well,
yeah,
we're gonna wait and see if there are any other questions for Rep Dodge before we head, Dr. Clarkson.
I'd like to know what led to the recall section.
oh, you know. I honestly am not certain whether there was, you know, I think that I think a lot of communities have, you know, these concerns, and I think that, what was helpful is that what they arrived at was like after much community intake and discussion, and really thinking, about, you know, objectively what would be feasible and fair, and, you know, just enough of a challenge to not allow sort of egregious, you know, nonsense to take place in a select board or in a town, you know, so not letting people, right, like kind of balancing, you know, when it's not fair for a community to have to wait for the next elections to do something if somebody is acting egregiously, but also not making it really easy for an individual to take, you know, have a vendetta.
Sounds like Prop 1.
It's different than Prop 1, but it sounds sort of similar.
It's a good sentiment though, and I think many towns, if they were developing a charter in today's day and age, would be making a similar decision.
I think it's a great idea.
I think it's a good tool if used appropriately. It also can be really political and problematic if used inappropriately. Senator Bukowski.
So there was a charter committee that, was there a chair of that charter committee?
I believe that there may.
Tracy may know too, I just think if
Tracy
there was
will know
charter
much
committee,
more,
we should be
yeah,
Yeah.
I attended as a member of the public. And around the discussion around just cause section, I attended a couple of those because I was very curious about how folks, you know, felt about it and what the discussion around that topic would be, and sort of, you know, learned from folks what their experience had been with Burlington and Winooski, and at the time it felt like a city by city or town by town or village by village sort of decision would be a good way to kind of start these discussions. And, you know, we look forward to, you know, hearing from more folks and seeing whether this is a policy that is adopted consistently statewide, but yeah, at the time, it was a useful exercise, I think, and a good exercise as well for a lot of people. And at our town meeting day, there was definitely a lot of discussion, so.
Great. Well, thank you, Rep Dodge. Really appreciate you coming to talk with us about it. We're gonna hear from Tracy Delphia now. Hi, Tracy.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Were you on the screen when we introduced ourselves? I don't remember.
I do not believe so, no.
Okay, so we're gonna introduce ourselves since you haven't been in our committee yet. I'm Senator Ruth Hardy from the Addison District.
I'm Olivia Parker, the committee assistant.
Hi Tracy, Tanya Vingovsky, Chicken Central.
Hi, I'm Rebecca White. I'm from the Windsor County District.
Bob Norris, Franklin County, and Town of Ellenburg and Grandin.
I am Watson, Washington District.
Allison Clarkson, Windsor County District.
So Tracy, that's us. If you want to introduce yourself, and then tell us what you'd like us, you've heard some of our questions, and discussion about the charter, but if you could give us some more background about what happened, at the local level, that would be great.
Sure thing. For the record, my name is Tracy Delphia. I'm the vice chair of the Town of Essex Select Board. I should also note that I'm also a state employee, but I am here solely in my capacity as a private resident and elected official of the Town of Essex. The proposed changes originated from a charter review committee. The select board created this committee in summer of 2022. The review committee worked diligently meeting throughout the fall and came up with a huge body of work. They did some really extensive work to the full charter. And the select board did go through all of those and decided on the 5 articles, the 5 proposed changes that you see in front of you. Those for review: reorganization of the charter, ability to adopt and enforce ordinances and set license fees, adopting a just cause eviction ordinance, recall of select board members, and also moving from a zoning board of adjustment model to a development review model. Let's see here. In answer to the question, there are 5 members of that committee. There were some that resigned following handing that body of work off to the select board. We did recently reappoint 1 member of that committee, so it is still a standing committee as they're constantly looking at that.
Tracy, can I just interrupt you? Your volume is going in and out, and I don't know if it's because you're too far from your speaker or if there's some other issue. But sometimes your volume is okay, and sometimes you sound kind of like the Peanuts characters. Headset, that might help.
Is that better?
Yes, that is better. Thank you.
All right. So let's see here. Where was I? Yes, there are 5 members. It is still a standing committee. There is a large body of work to still be done, given that they handed us an entire packet of changes, and we still do need to review those and get public input feedback through that process. For the, let's see here. I feel like I'm jumping around, but feel free to just rapid fire questions at me. There was a question earlier around the number of voters on the checklist. For the 2023 town meeting vote, there were 8,781 voters on the checklist, and 965 of those active voters cast a ballot via Australian ballot or absentee ballot on actual town meeting day. There were some questions around the role of the Zoning Board of Adjustment and Development Review Board. Essentially, current state within the town of Essex is the Zoning Board of Adjustment handles all appeals. The Planning Commission actually handles the planning work, the development of the town plan, the zoning regulations, and they hear development review applications. So the idea behind this approach is to in place more of a separation of duties so that the planners can plan and then actual interpretation from the work of that planning on the zoning regs in response to applications would be done by a separate body. And on a personal note, having been a member of a planning commission, during that planning work, if one is focused on another body interpreting that, one tends to focus more on potential unintended consequences, given that you will not be hearing those applications. And also as a side note, the Planning Commission this evening, as part of their regular meeting, they are starting to create that transition plan in anticipation of the outcome of this charter proposal.
Were there other questions for Tracy?
If you have the numbers, it would be helpful for me to know, what the vote counts were on the different, articles.
Absolutely, I have that right here in front of me.
Uh,
The authority to adopt and enforce ordinances for licensing, fixing reasonable and necessary license fees, yes, 748, no, 197, blank was 20. You heard about the just cause eviction, so I will skip over that one. Recall of select board members, yes, 666, no, 266, blanks were 33. The creation of a development review board to replace the zoning board of adjustment, yes, 763, no, 175, blank 27.
Thank you.
And the reorganization was yes, 770, no, 162, blank 33.
These are also on our website. They're not under Tracy's name, they're under Greg Juggins' name.
Okay.
And Greg was not able to be with us, because he had a family emergency he had to attend to. But he is the town manager.
Yeah, we've heard before.
So there's more information on the website, I'm telling you.
Because
Bless you.
Thank you. Tracy, do you also know who, and maybe you said it and I was just spacing out, who was the chair of the, or who is the chair of the charter committee?
That was, well, Bruce Post is the current chair. During the former charter work, it was Lauren Lehman.
Lauren
Lauren,
Lehman,
we know Lauren.
our
Lehman.
lawyer here at OPR.
The OPR, like, Lauren Lehman.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, are there any other questions for, do you have more, Senator? Think so.
I do want to ask if you have any concern with eliminating the Zepto second in Essex's fiscal year.
I do not, to me, not speaking on behalf of the select board because we haven't discussed that. However, to me, it makes good sense to eliminate that very, very infinitesimal possibility.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are not any more questions for Tracy, why don't you just hang for just a second, Tracy? Do you want to hear from someone else?
I would like to hear from the charter committee.
Okay, we can do that. We'll schedule this bill for next week.
Yeah.
To hear a little bit more.
And then I do want to just, if anyone's watching, because I have done a lot of constituent outreach about the removal of the just cause eviction section.
I'm sure.
So if there are citizens that want to speak, I would love to offer them that.
Okay, so why don't you coordinate with Lydia on getting a couple, not a ton, not a lot of time, but some witnesses for next week.
Okay.
Senator Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So with the removal of the just cause eviction piece was coming out of the House. If we were to return to the original way the charter was voted on by the community, we would obviously have to go to a conference committee at that point. Or, you know, if, I'm wondering.
I will just say it right out there. I'm skeptical about putting it back in for a couple of reasons, not because not on a policy issue reason, but more on a practical reason, which is I think that it would be hard to get the votes for it. It would likely be vetoed, and I don't think that we or the House have the votes to override it. So I wouldn't want to hold up the entire charter. I think that was the sort of math that the House was doing as well. And that's the big reason that they removed it. However, I'm totally open to a discussion about it.
Could I ask?
Yeah.
Ms. Delphia, so if in the instance that it is not likely that the charter would survive the legislative process while still having just cause eviction be a part of it, is the preference of the community like just get these changes in for us? Or is that kind of the discussion that you will be bringing witnesses? Has there been a statement by the town or anyone on that point?
Tracy, do you want to answer that?
Yes, thank you. One of the reasons why we did put separate articles on the ballot was anticipating this exact situation, where, you know, picking and choosing what moves forward, what doesn't. I think that recognizing the community vote and the importance of the will of the voters, I believe that each section would stand on its own, and we would appreciate attention to whatever would be able to move forward this session.
That's all. Thank you. Senator Bielski.
My question may actually be for Representative Dodge, and you may not know the answer. So I know in the past when we've had sort of charters that had multiple articles like this, and some of which might be controversial, there were multiple bills introduced. Is there another Essex charter bill that includes that just this piece?
No, there is not. And I mean, as far as if, you know, Tracy just gave her reaction, which was, you know, like we saw this coming and the towns, the select board and the committee saw this coming, that this might be a difficult part of it. We did not want to get hung up on that because we wanted a functioning charter. And I think that in the House GovOps discussion around the bill, our town manager and our select board chair were present for that reaction. Or, you know, how do you feel if we do this? And they said, well, we had these things voted on individually, and so you know, it's almost like having done what you just offered. But you know, in order for the charter to move forward.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah, I do still see like, if this is an opportunity to hear from the folks that wanted this policy to take place in their town, I can see the value of hearing from them, but.
Yeah, no,
But that's not your question right now, in terms of.
No, I mean, and I think we should hear from them for sure. I don't want to hold up the whole charter in order to put this back, because I think it would get beat. You wouldn't be able to override it, and then you're gonna be back here next year trying again. But I'm wondering that, I'm assuming that was part of the conversation over in the House too, is the sort of you know, vote math on the bill. Yeah, okay. Senator Clarkson.
So serving on Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs, and having tried to respond to the public's need for regulation on short-term rentals and on looking at just cause. We, as you may recall, many years ago, gave towns permission to set up ordinances. What that is to regulate short-term rentals. That has resulted in a higgledy-piggledy patchwork of different ordinances. Having done that and having addressed just cause also, I really would hope we could do just cause as a state. We are putting into our housing bill this year a landlord-tenant study committee. So I hope this will be left to the study committee, because this is a big issue that they're going to be hopefully addressing in the study committee. And so I would hope we could do it statewide next year if it's recommended, whatever comes out of that study committee, landlord-tenant issues. So I've overseen and enabled a patchwork of solutions which hasn't worked. Everybody now wants a statewide solution on short-term rentals. And so that's why we've been leery of enabling. I would be more leery of enabling a patchwork of just cause. So I mean, I'm happy to hear it because it will help feed our discussion, I hope, next year.
But I see what you're saying.
But I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah.
40-45.
Senator Bielski.
Yeah, no, I certainly understand the importance of moving this forward, what we can pass. I just have really significant concern when we say that towns have local control and that local democracy matters, and then 60% of the people vote for something and we choose not to do it.
Oh, I don't disagree.
So Tracy, it sounds like we're gonna take a little bit more testimony on this charter, so stay tuned, and you too, Rep. Dodge. And if you have suggestions for Senator Bielski on witnesses, that would probably be helpful. And we'll try to put this on our agenda next Wednesday or Thursday. We'll look at our agenda and see where it will fit. We do wanna move this forward for you, so don't worry.
It's coming your way.
And committee, does that sound like a a good plan. And with the Essex Junction, the city of Essex Junction, the first one, unless I hear otherwise, we can vote it tomorrow just to get that one off our docket.
Sounds good.
Sound okay?
Sounds excellent.
Okay, and Tanya, you'll be the, you'll vote on both of them, because they're both in your district.
Nice.
Yeah, okay.
We're the Windsor County Charter.
All right, thank you so much,
Tracy with
Tracy, much appreciated. Take
Maybe
care.
we need to add some details to Hartford.
Thank you
Charter.
so much for the time and consideration.
Yeah,
Welcome, our
thank you
pleasure.
for your service.
So you guys, we are gonna take a break until 3 o'clock, so that's 20 minutes, a huge long break.
Wow.
And then we're gonna come back and go through 310, and it's a long bill, so we need to